want you to step, bump, step, bump, bump, 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 step, bump, step, bump, bump.
It's really good. You a dancer?
No, not I'm just drunk.